From Hamilton and Rosberg taking each other out in a title fight, to Ricciardo and Verstappen fighting to be Red Bull's #1 driver, here are the biggest team feuds in Formula One in the last decade. Starting off with a feud that defined the turbo hybrid era, Lewis Hamilton versus Nico Rosberg. Now, Hamilton and Rosberg were actually teammates in their karting days, so when the Brit arrived at Mercedes in 2013, people thought this would be a nice reunion. But boy, did we get a fight! Right from the get-go, everyone could see the frustration building between them, with Rosberg's lockup in Monaco in 2014, denying Lewis the pole position, or them clashing in China and Japan in 2015. One thing that was the same for these 2 years, though, was that Hamilton won the championship. But by the end of 2015, something had changed. When Lewis threw the runners-up cap at Rosberg after winning the title in Austin, the German flung the cap back at him, showing he'd had enough. He then went on to win the last 3 races, carrying this momentum into 2016. Now, this was easily one of the most chaotic Formula One seasons in recent history. Both drivers were at the top of their game and didn't hesitate to get their elbows out on track. In fact, they even took each other out in Spain and clashed multiple times after that. It was an intense back and forth throughout the year, as the championship came right down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. Rosberg only needed P3 to win, and yet Hamilton tried his level best to slow the field down and make his teammate vulnerable. Though in the end, it was the German who had the last laugh. That being said, we were all left wanting more, as Rosberg shocked the world by announcing his retirement at the end of that year. Speaking of wanting more, though, most people would love to see Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez duke it out once again. Now, this wasn't a top-team rivalry, so it often goes under the radar. But trust me, this is as intense as it gets between two teammates, with many people calling it a miniature civil war. The two Force India teammates weren't even fighting for championship place. They just always found themselves battling each other on the track. Of course, Perez was the more experienced driver here, but even he didn't hold back. So throughout the 2017 season, they clashed multiple times, even colliding in Azerbaijan and Hungary. The worst one, however, was their crash in Belgium heading into Oru. Ocon was trying to sneak his way through Perez's inside line, but Chico squeezed him so much that he actually ran into the barriers. Luckily, the cars didn't sustain any lasting damage, and they still finished the race. What was damaged, however, was the two teammates' relationship. In fact, 2 hours after the checkered flag had been waved, Ocon went ahead and posted a scalding hot tweet. "We were having a good race until Perez tried to kill me 2 times. Anyway, he didn't manage to do so, ending up P9, he wrote. Oh, and even in interviews after that, they couldn't stop throwing shade at each other. While the Frenchman called Sergio unprofessional and dangerous, Chico said there was no room for 2 cars there anyway. After this, however, Force India finally decided to clamp down on the two and enforced a no-fight policy for the rest of the year. That said, this isn't the only rivalry Ocon's been involved in. After all, his clash with Alonso is still fresh in everyone's memory. Though, while they didn't necessarily show it on the track, only almost crashing once or twice during their time at Alpine, there had been some serious trouble brewing in the background over the past couple of years. Ocon, for one, said that he'd been overworked at Alpine. All because, apparently, Alonso was too much of a diva and didn't do much testing for the team. In fact, he went as far to say that he helped the team with 98% of the car's development. Alonso, however, felt that the opposite was true, saying that the Frenchman was being deliberately favored by the team. And, well, it all culminated in their collision during the sprint race in Brazil, as they both dropped out of the top 10 due to the damage they'd received. Here's the funny part, though. Alonso just did not care, since the Spaniard was about to leave the team anyway. In an interview, he talked about how he doesn't even want or need to talk it out with Ocon. "One more race and it's over, finally," he said. And while Esteban said he was disappointed by this behavior, Fernando just plugged his ears and abandoned ship to join Aston Martin. Having said that, while this feud was out there for everyone to see, the tension between Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo is something that's still mind-boggling. I mean, back when Ricciardo was still at Renault and regularly joked with Lando, it really felt like these two would be the most hilarious driver pairing on the grid. And yet, when the Honey Badger joined McLaren, things just didn't click. Whether it was Daniel struggling to compete against the young Brit, or Lando saying he didn't feel any sympathy toward the Aussie for his struggles, it almost felt like there was this air of jealousy between them. In fact, when Danny Rick won the race at Monza, Norris even made a cheeky comment saying he could have easily overtaken his teammate had the team not ordered him to stay back. Obviously, a lot of it was spun up by the Netflix series Drive to Survive. But Ricciardo did admit last year that, despite everyone in the media wanting them to be best friends, the relationship was just not something he could force. That said, while this rivalry never really took off on track, the one between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen certainly did. In fact, it's continued into the 2023 season as well. Now, we all know that Max is Red Bull's golden boy and the reigning champion, so it's kind of a given that they'd prioritize him over Sergio. In fact, most people think that Perez is the second driver at the team. But of course, the Mexican didn't join a top team just to play second fiddle. He wanted to win. This is where things started to fall apart between them. First, it was Perez seemingly crashing on purpose to secure pole in Monaco. And then it was Max disobeying team orders to deny Chico a P2 finish in the championship. Oh, and remember, the Dutchman had already won the title, so the only reason why he didn't let Perez through to P6 was, well, pure spite. When Max set the fastest lap in Saudi Arabia earlier this season to earn an extra point, Perez felt like he was being left out by the team as he was ordered to go slower. Now, this rivalry could either continue as the season continues, or we could genuinely have another Hamilton-Rosberg moment at the top, which is so exciting. You know what else was exciting, though? The intense feud between Ricciardo and Verstappen. Now, this happened for one simple reason. They were both young and reckless. No, seriously, Max was still a teenager when he joined Daniel at Red Bull, and the Honey Badger was in the form of his life, too. Besides, Ricciardo's the only driver who's been able to match Verstappen in equal machinery, so sparks were bound to fly. Of course, they collided multiple times, but the one in Baku stands out the most, where Max swerved on the straight and Daniel ran straight into his back. In fact, the crash was so bad that the team made them both apologize to the folks back at the factory. Though the relationship was never the same after this, and this ultimately led to Ricciardo leaving Red Bull because he felt like the team unfairly favored Max. So, from Ricciardo and Verstappen fighting to be Red Bull's #1 driver, to Hamilton and Rosberg taking each other out in a title fight, these were the biggest team feuds in F1 in the last decade.